We'll agree the amended schedule of business. Everyone saw this. The schedule of business has changed. We're just nodding this through again. We're just noting. Again, there were a few nods. Great, fantastic. And can we agree the guillotine of 7:45, which this week we're not going to have to extend, are we? Great. Okay. So, to receive and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November. Any issues with the minutes that anyone saw? True record? Issues? No? Fantastic. Okay, it's flying through. So there were some matters arising from the minutes. The first one was a paper presented by Sam. What we've done with that is we decided that what we do is we send it to elections committee because it's something that we feel is incredibly important, kind of making elections accessible and inclusive as we can. So we've passed that paper on to elections committee to discuss, and then we can discuss it as a group when it comes back to us in the form of the report from elections committee. We'd like to say thanks to Sam as well for bringing it to kind of inform us. And also I think Sam might work with Amy to run a workshop on it at some point as well, potentially. That would be great. And then next up, another matter arising. We've got a report from the elections committee, which is from Otis.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Oh, sorry, we get the microphone. Someone. Billy, cheers.
Hello, everybody, including everybody on the internet. It feels really weird holding a microphone. I've never really done it before. Basically, Elections Committee has managed to arrange 10 by-elections, which will really fill up council. It's a really significant amount of councillors. Unfortunately, we've not managed to arrange 5, but that's just because there's been communication problems or we couldn't find candidates. All the representative councillors will manage to be elected apart from mature, and that's only because we couldn't get mature students committee to respond to us. And we've produced some election rules, which I'm sure we'll get to you at some point. Basically, we're running a sort of EGM, although I think we're calling them AGMs just for clarity. Each of us has chosen a certain number of departments to organise for, so we're setting dates, venues, we're doing publicity. It's very much councillor focused because there obviously isn't a lot of staff time to do it. They'll be held between the 7th and the 9th of December, so you'll hopefully have up to 10 new councillors here next meeting, which is really good. The students themselves will nominate at the EGM. There won't be any campaigning, so there won't be a campaigning spend limit or anything, because there won't be any. And we're going to check U-cards to verify whether people can vote. And I think that's more or less it. Oh, we've chosen our senior returning officer to be Abdi Sullivan, who's the president from 3 years ago of the union. And a nice guy, and I'm sure he'll do a good job. What else have we got? One thing we thought you ought to note is we haven't decided to set a quorum. Quorums aren't usually set in council, but we are expecting probably quite small vote numbers. But due to the small nature of the departments and the limited nature of publicity time we've had for this, a quorum's not going to be really very realisable, so I hope you're okay with that. And also, Charmaine is stepping down as returning officer after this semester, so we will be electing a returning officer for officer elections next semester at the last council meeting of this year. Any questions?
Christy.
I'm aware I probably should have asked this to one of my team. Oh, sorry, I'll take the I'm aware I probably should have asked this to someone in the team who's on the elections committee, but it just came to me. About the checking U-cards in going in. So I was a dual honours student and did politics and philosophy and was the philosophy counsellor. My U-card said politics. Is there any way we can work that if someone turns up and their U-card says a different department but they're a dual honours student?
Quite simply, we haven't thought of it. Well, it's obviously essential dual honours students vote. I mean, particularly in modern languages, it's very likely that most of the voters will be dual honours students. And to some extent, that's something we need to check, but I'm not sure how else we'd verify it.
Sam?
On that point, I know that there's also some students that switch onto a new course and their UCARs again don't change. So, see if that's just an added thing on that.
Again, on that point, we'll look into it, but I suspect we'll have to do it on sort of personal identification or something. We will look into it as a committee.
Just as an addition there, the dual honours thing can be sorted, apparently, according to Democracy Coordinator. I think I get this one. So Amy says that's okay. Is it? Sorry, assuming you still want to ask your question.
You kind of cleared it up. I was going to say you could just get them to, you could just like on the advertisement, however you're advertising the EGMs, to say if you're a dual honours student, just email us in advance so that they have your name down.
The issue would be identifying
I think also for Sam's point, those students can probably get free new UCards from KICS and maybe just send them forward if they want to, because KICS will give them new UCards, so new departments.
Thank you.
I was just going to some kind of solution.
All right, okay, great.
I was just going to say, like most departments, if they're holding the EGMs in their department buildings, the system that they have set up, you can actually search students who's got all their information on it.
I'm really sorry, but although we did try to arrange EGMs in the departments, for various reasons, including lack of space within departments and also some departments that don't have significant space to hold those kind of events, we're not actually holding any in departments. Generally, they're in the Arts Tower or the Union, and I'm really sorry on that, but there's literally no other way we could have done it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions to Otis on this update? Fantastic. Council is now... sorry, I beg that. Daniel?
Could you just verify again how voting is going to be done? Are you going to do ballot papers there and then? Or is it going to be online?
Yeah, I'm really sorry I didn't address that. We will be doing ballot papers there and then, and I think the counting will have to be done by a student union member of staff at a later date, so probably the morning after, because of the way counting officers are appointed.
Any other questions? Brilliant. Council is now agreeing the dates for the elections of student union officers in March 2016. Again, this was circulated as part of this. Is there any questions on the dates? We agree them? You can just nod this through, can't we? Just agree. Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. Next up is Otis as well.
Hi guys, again, I suppose. I'm speaking in my sort of personal council hat. Don't take this as a statement from Elections Committee, because it's not gone through Elections Committee. It's something me and Nathaniel have come up with, and we'd be very interested to see what you thought of it. This is a motion, so this would last the term of the current council. It's not a policy, although we might recommend a policy if this passes.
It's page 15 of your agenda.
Sorry. Basically, various councillors, students, all sorts of people keep coming up to us as councillors and saying sort of, what's this deal about slating? Are they political parties? What's the connection between them and how do they work? And we've sort of looked into it, and we don't think it's terribly democratic. We think it's running rather against the ethos of council, because we're all meant to be independent members. I'm not sure whether the Constitution explicitly bans political parties, but it doesn't sort of say political parties are allowed to form in council. What was I going to say? As I'm sure you've all read the paper, I've taken the recommendations for election committee directly from a similar motion passed by the City of London University Students' Union. Basically, they chose to do this same thing for pretty much the same reasons. Although we recognise most slates occur in slates occur in most student union elections, we do think they might be bad for democracy. And as I've made aware on the paper, several student unions in the UK and internationally ban them. The main point of why we're banning slating, we think, is that it's disadvantaging independent candidates. And given that most people who apply for council are independent candidates, and that's always been the model of representation so far, it doesn't really make sense. And also it could potentially make SU Council more accessible because, for example, we had the BME Council resign because they didn't think there was enough diversity in the slates for this year's election and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Otis.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Otis? Just bear in mind that I hope these are questions and not speeches, because I'm not being deliberately harsh if I cut off your question because it's not a question, if I think it's a speech. Questions? Daniel, I saw you.
Just regarding the officer elections,
Hmm?
this would apply to that.
Yes, definitely.
So every year you get a number of students who will be running, let's say, socialism Marxist using it as their campaign. You see it every single year. They do have very similar sort of like campaign layouts for that. And those students are using it as an angle in their campaign.
If you look at the recommendation points, effectively we're trying to discourage people from using the same slogan or publicity design. There's no reason why they can't have a very similar manifesto, and indeed most students probably will, because to be honest, we all think the same thing about the state of the government pretty much, and it's not too much of an issue what policies they bring forward, and it would be very anti-democratic to start dictating policies to them. This is mainly on a formal slate, so they can't have the same.
Thank you, Otis.
publicity.
Sorry, I feel like you suitably answered the question without speaking for Minesh.
Mine's kind of similar, but with slogans. How would that be managed? Because people don't submit slogans or find out who else has the same slogan as well. Last year, lots of different candidates had the same slogan, found out afterwards.
Quite simply, we'd have to change something about the nominations process to allow that to happen. That'd be something for Elections Committee to look into. And as I say, we've only recommended the ban includes these clauses. The actual nature of the ban would be for Elections Committee to decide, and also Council may wish to comment on it tonight.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Although I agree with all the advantages of selection, it's really not clear how we come up with an alternative to encourage first years and freshers and international students who are traditionally less likely to stand.
Okay. Sorry, I understand the point of your question. It sounds like you're speaking against the motion.
I'm happy to answer that as a question because, as a point of fact, slates don't always encourage diversity. As I've said before, the BME Council resigned because they weren't. And any candidate can run. Just because a slate may ask you to run doesn't necessarily mean you're more likely to run. Indeed, this might encourage particularly first-year students who might be put off by the sort of BNOCs on council, who can get their seats just by putting maybe a red square on their label, and it might encourage more independent thinking within council.
Thank you. Yeah, I know.
The motion in itself is quite good. Stating I think should be banned. But talking about your recommendations 1 and 2, can you tell us why it would be unfair if two people running for different posts, different positions, they are promoting each other's campaign. Why is it not good?
That's the nature of slating. If we weren't to ban that, we wouldn't be banning slating.
If it's the same position maybe, and a group of people wearing it's okay, but if it's like something entirely different.
You can recommend that as an amendment if you wish, but I wouldn't support it because it wouldn't be banning slating.
Thank you. Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it would apply to the NUS conference election. Because like you say in your recommendation, the candidates running for different roles, it's kind of the same role, but there are 7. And I know that kind of, I think a formal slating is over the NUS delegate elections, so I was wondering what the position is.
I think the current position is that it's a ban on all elections, although obviously you're free to, at this meeting, make any amendments you wish to make, and if you wish to, do so now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to Otis on this motion? Yep, Tom.
How would you recognise that slating has taken place?
Quite simply, we'd look at the recommendation points, and if candidates' publicity had more than one candidate on, that would be a problem, and they would either get sanctioned in some way by the returning officer. If candidates shared the same slogan or publicity design with another candidate, they would be sanctioned by the returning officer. And if individual candidates' budgets were used in some way for another candidate, they'd be sanctioned by the returning officer.
Thank you, Simon.
I think certainly on the slogan point, you'd have to decide slogans before publicity, but that isn't a problem anyway, because slogans are decided and sort of agreed on long before even the name of candidates are published. So I don't think that's currently an issue. With publicity, I don't know. It would be the returning officer's discretion on this one.
Okay. Any other questions for Otis? Is there a speech against the motion? Mr. McMorrow.
Okay, so firstly I want to say sorry for the fact that I'm in a suit. I don't normally wear one to work as SU president. I was at some formal things in the university today. But I do normally wear a red square, and while I want to discuss this properly, I don't think that this should become about specific attacks on different groups of political opinion. People who wear red squares aren't a political party. We all have independent thought, disagree with each other. And actually, people in support of free education don't always win SU elections. They haven't necessarily in the last 3 or so years. And some of us have worked hard to be in the positions we are. So I do think there's needs for problems with slates to be examined. I think if we were to have them, everyone needs to be aware it's a possibility. I want everyone to have the opportunity to run with people they agree with, to have that kind of support there. I think we need to have that open discussion about the fact that this is something people do, and actually tailor off some of the problems. If people get too much money for leaflets, potentially, if you get double the budget, we should maybe look at loving a lower percentage if we did keep them. But I do think, I don't normally talk about my own experience with elections, but I want to in this case. So when I ran for SU president, I was having real struggles with my mental health, and actually it really helped to be able to run with a friend who I agree with politically. And actually, by being able to swap and go out with each other's leaflets, sometimes that was really important. And I wish more people had that opportunity, not less. And in that sense, I do think for some disabled candidates, it can be really important to have this kind of method. Talking about the NUS delegate elections, I know that the main reason the slate that got a lot of criticism happened was to encourage a disabled, mature postgrad woman to run for NUS delegate because she wouldn't have ran on her own. And actually, I think that's really important. The slate probably got a lot of things wrong, but that's about having conversations about that particular one, not slates in general, which haven't always come in for the same criticism. When I talk about myself and Minesh running on a slate, we just shared leaflets. We had different policies, but we had important values behind them that were the same. And because we've worked together so much, I think we should be held accountable for each other's politics in elections. If Minesh said that he wanted to burn down part of the SU, I'd probably be quite responsible for that because we'd worked together. He hasn't said that, just to clarify. So I should tie up. But also, we weren't attached to a political party, and to suggest that slates a party politicising council, like, I think it's false. There hasn't been a slate running for SU Council, for one. And actually, we ran on a form of slate, and actually 2 of the candidates against me mentioned their political party in their manifesto. I didn't, and I hope that my independent thought was still seen. And actually, I think it's more democratic to have slates. It gives everyone the right to run with people they agree with, which I think is a right in a democracy. And also, I think slates are better if they're overt, not covert. You will always have people running together, and if they can be held accountable for what each other does, I think it's better than if they are all agreeing on things behind closed doors, but no one knows that. So that's my 2 pence. But whatever council decides, it's obviously important for elections committee to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. Are there anyone who wants to speak for the motion? Well, that makes the next bit really easy, then. Okay. Pardon? Yeah, well, you can waive it if you want. It's just been you and Christy, but summarise if you want.
I'm really sorry if you felt targeted there, Christy. I simply used it as an example that councillors would recognise, because obviously you probably haven't really heard of a lot of the slates that have been and gone over the years. Some of you might even be new this year. Yes, Christy has made some valid points about why slates might be good, and I've made some, I think, equally valid points about why slates might be bad. Now it's your choice.
Okay. So, council is now voting on the motion in front of you. Votes for Otis's motion, please. Oh, there's more hands. Sorry. Can we be certain? Sorry, I know it's you're still thinking, but...
Can you abstain? Okay. Can you abstain?
How many did you make it?
I made 14. Count again.
Alright, can we have hands right up?
Like
sorry, it's
straight up,
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Votes against, please. And any abstentions? The motion is defeated. Thank you very much. The next motion is Josh here?
He had to go. He wasn't able to come because his grandma was very ill.
Oh, right, okay. Councillor, sorry to hear that. Are you going to present on this then, or just, I realise there are like 10 of you presenting it. So
Take it.
okay, yeah. So Christy will speak on this. Just to inform council, this motion is a very interesting one in what it calls for upon to happen. So a student strike ballot from the NUS is something that's unprecedented, at least to. Minesh's got other. I'm working on information that's not mine here, but I've been told. So if it's not unprecedented, then I will allow you. Okay, there were some in the 70s, but hasn't happened in a while. What this ballot will do is, if we agree to this motion, we will then say to the NUS that we want a ballot on the question herein. If 5% of all SUs that are affiliated with the NUS do that, then the NUS will call a national ballot. What will then happen is individual SUs will then have to make a choice about how they vote. It won't be down to individual students. But in our SU, what will happen is we will have a referendum to decide how the SU as a whole votes, just to make sure that you're all kind of aware. Are there any questions on the procedure of things that I can clear up before we begin? Yeah.
I feel like, just to make them up there, we're voting on whether we're having a ballot or whether to have a ballot.
Yeah.
Or whether having a ballot, or whether we tell NUS to
Yeah.
have a ballot.
And they can decide not to have a ballot, regardless of what we tell them. But democracy, guys, democracy. Okay, yeah, so are there any other kind of... Sam?
How long before this would go ahead?
So the strike in the question is, the strike should be on the 15th and the 16th of February, so...
What would this be in the time for?
That's kind of... I understand the kind of logistics behind the question, but it's not...
I can take the question
Go on.
if you want to, yes, proposing it. Yeah, we'd have to organise a referendum, presumably in January or beforehand if NUS called it. That would be extra resource, but I think it would be our decision on that we'd want to be giving our students the say rather than it going through council or something. So, yeah, it would be technically up to the SUs, but hopefully we'd be organising one.
Any other questions?
I should actually propose the motion first, shouldn't I? So obviously this is my motion because I've signed it, but it's not written by me. But I think the gist of the motion is that I think a lot of people can agree there's a lot of bad stuff happening to higher education right now. Tuition fees have gone up, have gone up in the last 5 years. The HE Green Paper suggests they could go up again, which is in a motion that's up later today. And we're struggling to work out how to respond to lots of these things, like maintenance grants getting cut, like DSA getting cut, like international students being attacked. And it feels like we've run out of tactics. Demo after demo happens, we hear some speeches, we applaud them, we go home. And the government doesn't listen at the end. And what this proposal is to just have a think about whether students not going to lectures for a day or two is a way of raising attention. It's a way of trying a new tactic. And the reasoning that is that this happened in Quebec, in Canada, when tuition fees were raised. Students didn't go to lectures and essentially brought universities to a standstill, and in the end, they beat the tuition fee rise. But I'm not asking you today to vote to decide you want students to go on strike. I'm wanting you to decide whether it's something worth having a conversation about. It's worth having conversations that NUS have in their little NEC rooms that none of us listen to. I'm a president of a students' union, I frankly could not be bothered to listen to a 2-hour NEC NUS meeting. Maybe we should have the conversations with our students about what the tactics should be. And so the reason I'd encourage you to vote for it is because it's a really big conversation about what tactics NUS should have, and for once we might be able to have it as a really big democratic discussion, and I think that's really exciting. So if you think you'd vote no against this, but you think that it's worth saying why you'd vote no, or you'd vote for it, I'd encourage you to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Christy on the motion? Otis. Sorry, can I just shut the mic properly?
This is going to be the whole council meeting, you know.
I'm really.
People other than white men.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to bore council again. But my question's mainly about international students. There's two parts, really. First of all, how would international students interact with this strike, given that their visas often require them to attend teaching hours? And also, why in the demands isn't there any explicit mention made to the attacks on international students, given that there has been quite a lot?
Yeah, so I don't know why international students aren't in there. I would have put it in if it's not Josh who's written it either, I don't think, but whoever has written the... Or is it in... Sorry, Manesh. I'll answer first on the other bit. Which was the first question you asked, sorry? International students and... International students' participation. I don't think we'd expect, like, every student to walk out. Hey, if, like, every home student walked out, there probably wouldn't be any effective seminars or lectures for international students to go to, which I hope would be the point. That probably wouldn't happen, but it's about a big, mass event where hopefully if students weren't going to lectures in the day of a strike, they would be doing something else, doing some action or teach-ins about the importance of challenging the government on it and making mass awareness on it. Manesh, did you have more information on international students being included? They're not in our motion anyway. Maybe there's some mention in the Kafka one.
We're sending the question to the NUS. So essentially, this motion is not about whether or not you think students should be striking or even the logistics of student striking. It's just whether we think there should be a ballot on it. Yeah, go on.
Because this is meant to be just voting for a ballot, as Adam said, we can, when it comes to Sheffield voting itself, we can decide what our demands are as well. We can decide what we want to do and what we want to strike about. And I think international students are central to Sheffield's campaign, so international students' rights and visa issues should be central to our demands as well. So I think we get to decide that ourselves if we want to strike after this ballot to call for a strike.
Peggy, sorry.
Just to quickly clarify, I think like on visa restrictions, I think our student advice centre might be able to advise on it. I myself go on demo before. As long as I don't get caught, I should be all right. But it's just I know, like, I understand like how international student participations in it will be kind of worrying, but I'm sure if this is something that our union will want it to happen, I am happy to put all my force into to make this happening. So yeah.
Can an amendment be made to this? Is it sort of permitted
Okay,
under the
that's
Constitution?
interesting. I mean,
can
the
I-
amending it would be interesting because we're calling on the NUS to do something in conjunction with other SUs.
Well,
What is it
I
you-
don't wish to amend the question. It's more the demands.
Yeah, I know you're part of this kind of group that's answering questions, obviously.
So I should also add to Christie's statement that part of this demand has been called for by a number of other issues. So I think there's been about 7 or 8 student unions that have already set this set of demands and sent this question to the government. So I think if we were to vote and call for this now, we could change the demands afterwards. But I think to get the actual ballot, it has to be the same set of questions and demands.
So, this is an interesting discussion that I had earlier, is that kind of, are we sending, my belief is that we're sending to the NUS the ballot question that we want asked, because you don't ballot on demands, you ballot on a question. That's the point of a referendum. So my opinion is that amending the demands is not really here nor there, because...
I've just checked the group that have coordinated on calling for ballots, the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts, on their motion. It doesn't include any demands on international students.
So it's just calling for the question.
It's calling for the question, yeah.
Okay.
So I would say we can probably clarify that we probably don't need the demands. It's just a way of phrasing it.
Just given that I think it's really important that we have the right sentiment in this motion, can I recommend an amendment to include a point 6 on the demands to reverse all damaging changes to international student status in the UK?
Yeah. Right, okay. The motion now in front of you is the amendment to the motion. Are there any speeches against Otis's amendment? Otis, would you like to summarise your amendment?
Well, ultimately, we all know about what awful challenges face international students, and I really think this is a brilliant idea, but we need to have at the core of our philosophy when we're recommending it to the NUS that international students are included in this and that they are a key group being really hit hard by these changes.
Thank you. Okay. So, yeah. Voting on the amendment now to add a 6th point, calling for what Otis has just added. Votes for, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Votes against? Abstentions? Thank you. The motion is now the motion you all had in front of you, plus Otis's amendment.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What is the official amendment and where is it?
Okay, so
It's
point 6. Yeah, I realised I was thinking that you probably want something concise,
yeah,
don't you?
Please.
So can we have something short and concise?
To reverse all damaging changes to international student status in the UK.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And everyone's happy with that's what they were voting on, yeah? Just for democracy. As opposed to Otis has now changed it to Otis's.
Question, since we'd be sending we'd be sending the letter to NUS. Would you like us to be kind of specific about the things that have happened, like right to rent checks being implemented, and say right to rent checks and the narrative against immigration and international students, just so because this is going to be a Sheffield specific thing if we add this one. And would you like that elaboration just so that we've got a specific demand, just because we can send the letter and can say that?
So,
I mean, we could, but I'd imagine the NUS know what's happening with international students.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Minesh.
Could I make an amendment on that?
Yep. Go
So
for it.
on
No,
point 6, I
democracy.
feel damaging changes might actually be too vague. Could I maybe suggest that Peggy reword it and, well, the international students, some form of international students campaign within Sheffield Students' Union rewords it to make it slightly less vague, but not have to bring it back here.
I think it needs to be decided.
What did you say just now again?
I just said to reverse all damaging changes to international student status.
Because I feel like people might say damaging changes is subjective, and we should be a bit clear.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Sorry, it's international student issues, but I can't think of like good words. That's the first.
Can we give her like 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, is that okay?
Like, and then read back to the motion.
Can we come back and vote on it? Is that possible? Is that possible, Chair?
Constitutionally, no. Yeah, go on.
2 points.
You're being helped out here, Peggy. Think.
Thank you. There's 2 points I just want to clarify, which is it mentions the damaging cuts to maintenance grants, but doesn't acknowledge potential benefits that have come through recently, including the extension of maintenance grants to part-time students. And I'm just wondering whether this will potentially have any repercussions in that respect. And also, just clarification really, what are we aiming to get out of a strike of students? As to my understanding, it doesn't really seem to affect the economy in any way and therefore seems somewhat ineffective.
Which of the group of you would like to answer that?
Can have it. You just the first question was increasing grants to part-time students. Yeah. So the third demand is only to reverse the cuts to maintenance grants. So because changes to part-time students grants aren't cuts, it would only reverse the negative changes if it is successful in calling the government, which was your second point. So the theory, and I won't go too much into detail about the theory of student strikes, but it's basically that if we look at Quebec or if we look at every other student strike which happens quite prominently in most other countries, to be honest, is not putting pressure on the university. So the student strike isn't just to withhold our educational labour from the university, but it's, in the words of Joe Johnson, our universities minister, universities create a pipeline of a graduate pipeline. So the economy is dependent on having graduates graduate every year from the university and go into labour and sell their labour for profit. And if a student strike is successful, the aim is to withhold that for a long period of time. It is to create some kind of economic disruption, and it would a long-term economic disruption. So a two-day strike is a means to an end. Do you want to build on that?
But that's not the question either way. If you think that's illegitimate, feel free to vote against the motion if it was a referendum.
Yeah. But yeah, so this question is only whether or not we should have a ballot. But the theory of the student strike is to put pressure economically on the government.
Peggy, how are we doing? Do you have an amendment to the amendment or not?
I think.
Sorry, I know I'm pressuring you. It's just. Serena?
Just to give her some extra time, I actually agree with the vagueness of the demand, because international students, they don't only include overseas students, they also include European students who are not here on visas, but they face restrictions, for example, when it comes to eligibility to certain grants and demands when it comes to like just signing contracts for housing. They ask you to have a UK guarantor to pay the money up front entirely, and that's everything. Like that's something that happens to people from outside UK. So if it stays vague, it's not that much of an issue.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone that what we're voting on here is what we want to send to the NUS to then have them send back to us if they so decide to, for us then to have another vote on, not here, but in referenda. I appreciate what everyone is trying to say, and I appreciate the kind of, we want to be specific and we want to make sure that we're kind of highlighting the issues which international students are facing, because you know the government is attacking them in many ways. I'm just kind of slightly concerned that we're getting very kind of attached to amendments and things on something which is not necessarily going to have an impact on the SU at this stage.
I'm willing to drop my call for an amendment if that's your... That's fine.
Okay, so the motion before you all now is the motion as you see it plus point 6, which Otis amended onto it, reversing the attacks, damaging attacks on international students. Okay, you can now summarise the motion if you want, Christy.
I think everyone's probably in the whole way.
Waving that? Great. Okay, so votes for the amended motion, please. Hands up. Sweet. Votes against? Abstentions? Thank you all. The next motion, I'm handing the chair to Serena on because my society is named in it, and so am I, and it was my petition. So obviously I think it's a good idea. So it's a bit unfair for me to chair it. So Serena's going to chair this bit, just to let you all know.
Okay. Do we have Curtis? Yes. Could you please present the motion?
Well, good evening, everyone. So my name's Curtis. I'm the proxy for geography, seeing as Adam's chair at the moment. So my motion is on refugees in the UK. So basically, in the light of the huge humanitarian crisis that we're currently facing, which has unfolded across the whole of Europe, we as an SU call to put pressure on the City Council to do what they can and lead the way to help these people. This is particularly relevant given the backlash against the refugees following the tragedies that have happened in France recently, and the increasing terror that has surrounded refugees coming over from Europe. Currently, the City Council have said that they will house, and I'm taking it their words, 120 units, which means to say families. And we feel that if we put more pressure onto the City Council, hopefully they in turn will put more pressure onto the national government to help this appalling situation. That's pretty much me done.
Are there any questions? Minesh?
Why specifically so many mentions to the Lib Dems or
so that was just basically me and Adam came up this together. It was a joint motion. Yeah. So that was more to add context to the kind of the situation as well, and to give it a bit of backing. But I think, obviously the letter won't be from the Lib Dem Society. It will be from the SU, the chair, and the president of the Students' Union.
Do you want me to just explain? So basically, the point is that despite the unpopularity of the Lib Dems in Sheffield, I still managed to get 500 signatures on a petition with, me standing outside the Lib Dem stall. And it was a petition which was very lots of Lib Dem societies did it in their own unions, and then I presented things to the City Council before, so I said that if it was going to do that, I'd be happy to do it. I'm also equally happy for you or Chrisley or whoever to do it, particularly. I'm not fussed.
I would just submit an amendment that normal thing is to get officers to sign the motion, so I would please.
That was, so I was, I know I'm kind of taking this, but
it's fine.
So it kind of made sense to me because I realised that I wanted it to look like it came from students, and I know you guys represent students, but you're not students. And that's why I wanted it to be by both, because as chair of council, if you want Serena to sign it instead of me, I'm equally kind of fine with that. It's more just to kind of show that the student body believes in this, and then the officer team, which represents the students but isn't necessarily students in and of themselves, believes it as well.
You have Peggy and Charmin. Peggy?
When you say to do more, because there's obviously there's two things. When you say calling the council to take more refugees, in terms of taking more refugees into Sheffield City, or is it you want to provide more for the refugees in Sheffield right now?
So
there's one to do more for refugees and then to take more refugees in your motion. So can you please clarify that?
I think it's probably easier to take kind of questions on this because it was my petition, but obviously Curtis is the proxy here. So in terms of doing more, so the City Council said they'll take 120 units worth of units of refugees, which is a horrendous way to talk about human beings. We think, well, I think, and the 500 students that signed the petition agree with me, I suppose, that the City Council can do more. And it's more about a kind of sign that if the City Council says we can take more than 120, then it makes it. If other cities then do the same and go, Sheffield is leading the way, it said it can take X amount of refugees because we've got Y amount of space, then other cities like Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham consider and say, well, if Sheffield can do it, why can't we? And then if lots of different cities are calling on the national government to say, no, we can take in this many refugees, and it makes them up their kind of appalling number of 20,000 over 5 years, in my opinion.
Charmin, you had a question earlier.
I was just going to say, when we signed it, can we just make sure that the chair and the vice chair just to make it only for
Otis?
No.
Otis?
I don't feel I can speak to Gabby, and she probably wants to answer this one for us, but given that Gabby is our welfare officer and is in charge of housing for the union, perhaps either by signature or even handing in the petition, perhaps she's better suited than necessarily the president or the chair of council to move forward.
I'm happy for whoever to hand in the it was just because I'd done it, and so it was more a sense of there's someone who's happy to do this. I'm not just Curtis is not proposing something which can't be done. I was just precluding that.
Simon?
Shall we just get all the councillors and the officers to sign it? So
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Because Gabby and Christy both have housing in Peggy, sorry.
Simon?
I suppose clarification, are we aware of where the 120 comes from? Is it based on current resources or is it just an arbitrary number?
So, to the best of my knowledge, that was a number that the city council told. So, metropolitan. Right, okay, start again. Councils were asked by the government to suggest how many they could take. The central government put out their 20,000 figure after and that was only after a lot of pressure by lots of different groups, the NUS included. And then city councils were because eventually it's city councils which actually have to house these people. City councils were asked how many, people can you take? Hence the very mechanistic language of units, because that's essentially what's being looked at. I don't like the way that's said, but I mean that's just the way. I don't blame the city council for that language. I blame the national government because that's the terms they use.
Okay, are there any other questions, or should we move to speeches against? Any speeches against the motion? No, would you like, Curtis or Adam, would you like to summarise the motion? Curtis?
So essentially it's to call on the City Council to do more for refugees, and it will be signed by the whole of Council and the Students' Union officers as well.
Okay, we will now move on to voting. All those in favour of the motion, raise your hands. All those against? All those abstaining? The motion passes. Okay. Should we move on to the other one? Okay. Save our contracts?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I get to be chair again now.
Yeah.
So the next one is save our contracts. The motion, this one's presented by Christy as well. It is just a conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really sorry if council is sick of me now. This one is hopefully quite an easy one to discuss. So in my objectives that I presented last week, one of mine was to work with medical students and generally work on STEM students' issues being represented in the Students' Union. I started the year wanting to do some work on medics' welfare, to engage medics with the Students' Union, and then the government dropped an absolute bombshell and has decided that they needed to review junior doctor contracts, which all our medical students will be on when they graduate. And they've changed what they call sociable working hours, the hours where you get paid a certain set of normal pay, from the standard around 9 to 5 to from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m, which means that in order to work for the same wages, medics will have to work much longer. The expectation of their amount of unsociable hours has stayed the same or increased, I think, despite the fact that the hours are now much more unsociable. And therefore, I think that this change in contracts isn't fair on our students who are graduating, and nor is it safe for patients when our medical students will have to be, well, not medical students, our junior doctors who our medical students will go on to be, will have to be working much longer hours for the same pay, and just in general expectation will have to work much longer. And that's really dangerous for our patients. You don't want your doctor being absolutely zonked on their feet. And I think this is part of a broader attack on the NHS by the government that we should make a clear stance about. I know it's not in the motion, this is about save our contracts, but with changes yesterday, like nursing students losing their bursaries, which isn't tied to this university, but other universities have nursing students. I think it's really important that we stand up for our students who are going to be working in the medicine profession. And I'm already trying to work with medical students, but I would really like council's support on behalf of the student body to say, we believe this. So hope you vote for it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Christy on the motion? Nope. None at all. Fine. Have you got any speeches against the motion? This is the easiest democracy ever. Okay, Christy, would you like to summarise your motion? Or you waive them? Look at you, so generous. Okay, so we move to a vote. We're voting for, can I see votes for the motion, please? Votes against? Any abstentions? Fantastic. We're now going to go to a 5-minute break. Have fun.
So obviously, I can see that we know students are passionate about the fact that Inoxtine is on the top of the Students' Union, isn't exactly a student-friendly venue. And I can see why this proposal's come forward. So I'm going to have to let everyone in into the deep, dark secret of the SU that we don't own the whole thing. And that half of the building we lease from the university, and we have a permanent lease on, and we can do what we want with largely. So the half that the offices are in, the half with Bar 1, the nightclubs, etc. Yeah, sorry? Yeah, the food court is the line. The opposite side is owned by the university. We have bits that we swap, so our shop and New Leaf are on their side, Santander and Property with Us are our shop and New Leaf are on their side, Santander and Property with Us are on our side, and it's just we do space swaps. But, importantly, the side which Inoxtine is on isn't run by the Students' Union. And therefore, when the university decided to put a Unicus-run fancy restaurant outlet on the top, the Students' Union doesn't really have a say. So we can't actually vote to convert Inoxtine into a study and computer room, but I would suggest that if councillors want to take it forward, we could take as a motion of, we can work, it doesn't need to be of like huge detail, but that the Students' Union Council supports making Inoxtine a space in which, a study space for students, and would encourages the university to make it a space where students can study. That would be my suggestion. If anyone has any questions.
Just a very minor point. Would it be possible for either one of the officers or a member of SU staff just to post a short statement explaining to students what parts of the union does have such a fairly permanent lease on, and so that they know what we can change and what we can't?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. We plan to make a statement about this afterwards anyway, send an email to the original poster and comment on the thing so that people were aware of it. Normally a lot of the university stuff is good. It makes the Students' Union look great. The Inoxtine is a bit of an exception. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just on Otis's last point, I don't think just because we think the university we shouldn't think the cloud union as well. We are still working. That have been discussed with
Yeah, but just in terms of clarifying, we can't just walk in there and rip out the restaurant.
Artyom.
Yeah, I was just wondering, if we were to kind of convert Inoxtine and somehow we managed to kind of like push our point across and they changed it, what about the staff members who work there, or wouldn't they lose their jobs?
Okay, so I'd clarify my proposal. I wouldn't suggest we put a motion that just says all trading up there stops. But I think it's a very realisable possibility that the space is more open to students. You can update. Sorry, you weren't listening.
If anyone ever reads the Constitution, this is not how it works.
So at the moment, we are in conversations with ACS and Unicus at the moment on making Inoxtine more accessible for a study space, because no one goes there anyway. It is actually just really beneficial for them to advertise it so that people can go and study. So that is the emphasis we're going down, because Inoxtine loses money. I think we can definitely, it lost 140k last year. We can definitely make provisions from the university to say that they would give staff other jobs if they were to change it, but that is a long-term aim. I think having Inoxtine a more studyable space is something that is quite winnable and wouldn't come at the detriment of any jobs anyway. So, but it does lose tons of money, so we should, it's a financial sinkhole, some might say.
Pete, sorry, Pete was next.
Yeah, I'm aware that the person who wrote this might want it to turn into a study space, but that's just the opinion of them. So if we were going to turn it into something for students, could we have some kind of just like go and ask the students what they actually want out of that space? We have just had the diamond and a bunch of other areas that we could study in. So if we could get some feedback on what we use the space for.
I think that is probably quite a good idea, and there are other things that students want in the space. However, despite the diamond coming up, I know there are a lot of students who like working in the Students' Union, just prefer it to libraries, and I think we are a bit overcrowded. So there's definitely reasons that even with the diamond, students want to do it, but I guess we could suggest it's something that officers should go away. I'm happy for council to mandate officers to go away and find out which things they want us to push on, but that we should be pushing for it to be a more student-facing space in general. Is that a motion? Well, I guess we can see whether council likes the motion.
Is there any other questions? Point of clarification more than a question, but it's no secret that the Students' Union does run a deficit from year on year. That's not included in our in the deficit, that £140,000. It's not
our building.
So yeah.
It's a Unicus, which is the university's commercial subsidiary company. And we don't run a deficit year to year. We ran a deficit last year. We are hopefully not going to run a deficit this year. Just so everyone knows. Sorry? We're not forecast to run a deficit, no.
Any other questions? Okay. I'm now going to put the motion to council, which Christy suggested, that council now mandates the officer team, Christy and Minesh leading, if you wish.
And Yvette.
The officer team, period, to go out and find what kind of student-led space we would be interested in seeing Inox converted into.
But to generally push for Inox to be a more student-facing space also.
Thank you. Yeah. Does everyone kind of get what motion we're voting?
So which of those two things?
Well, the whole thing.
We push for it to be a student-facing space and discuss with students what they would like out of the space.
And then...
Just to clarify that.
Yeah.
I think it would be consultation, realistically.
Is it the university that's losing money with Inox?
Yes. Well, this needs a bit of clarification. The university decided that that when it was making losses in its trading companies, that was bad because it was being subsidised by students' rent. So they set up a subsidiary company that's entirely owned by the university that's responsible for its own losses. So Unicus, which is the university subsidiary company, is losing money. And it's Unicus that's losing the money from Inox losing money. But obviously, it makes money from like IC Cafe and stuff like that.
So, Christie's motion. We've got that in mind. That's the motion before council. Everyone clear on it before we move to a vote on it? Just because I don't want people to vote on things they're not clear about. Okay. So, Christie's motion is now before. Votes for Christie's motion, please. CJ, you okay with that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I didn't mean counting, I meant more the motion. Votes against? Any abstentions? Thank you. We got the next one. Chris, are you leading on the next one as well? Empty computers during book classes? I can't remember who this is, sorry.
Neither can I.
It should be a vet. It's facilities.
Yeah, but they should have been technically, I guess.
It was Maria White, but...
Minesh wasn't. I don't think we said a lot in second.
I think it's important to remember that council remembers that these are not kind of motions necessarily that we have to vote on here and now. They're ideas which are ostensibly kind of, they have to be discussed by council, and we can mandate officers to do things, but it is just here as a kind of an expression of students' opinions, and I think it's very important that we are noting them. And it's important that officers kind of, if officers are doing things about them, they tell us about them, but we don't necessarily have to have some kind of.
Yeah, we can leave. If council
is
interested in them, they don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. We just note them and then move it on. So, Minesh, do you want to talk about that next?
Yeah, so this proposal basically asks, well, if we pass this now, it would mandate officers to try and get students to be allowed to use empty computers in booked classrooms when they're empty. Well, when there are free computers, because there are often no computers. So it'll be us trying to work. It'll probably be mandating me or Yvette to work with KICS to try and make sure there's a more holistically focused room booking policy that allows students to use computers all the time.
I think it's even when the class is on,
Yeah.
students being able to use the empty computers.
Yeah. So talking to lecturers and talking to KICS and making sure that that is allowed.
That's something maybe send academic representative committee.
That might be sensible because I think while I can see the demand for more computers, also the other concerns about students walking in and out of classes, so it's best going to professionalise.
Okay, so I think, is council happy to agree to send that to academic representative committee kind of on the basis of Minesh, you okay to do that?
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Everyone okay with that? There's no kind of, anyone disagreeing? Brilliant. The next one is creating a permanent quiet zone in the SU and is SU.
Thank you. So, as you all know from last week, hopefully, this is actually forms part of my objectives. So I'm really glad students have put it up and voted for it. And I guess I'm not quite sure what else to say, but I've quite a few officers are working.
Sorry, Annie, Simon's struggling to hear you.
Oh, sorry. Quite a few. So it forms part of my objectives, as you may know from last week. Quite a few officers are interested in it and working on areas of it. Yvette's been having conversations with accommodation and commercial services about using parts of their building, their bits of the building on this issue. I've also started to have conversations about quiet spaces during the nightclubs and in the venues, because there used to be quiet spaces there, but there currently aren't, or they're advertised so badly that no one can find them. But it is something that I'm going to continue to work on during the year. Does anyone have any questions on that?
So in terms of quiet spaces, are we going to create spaces that will always be quiet zones, or are we going to use spaces as and when, dependent on whether they're free or not?
The intention would be to create a permanent quiet zone or zones in the union. If that wasn't possible for whatever reason, I would still push for them in whatever form that was possible, but that would be the ideal aim, yes.
I was wondering, I was wondering whether, where exactly in the Students' Union the quiet zones will be? Are there any ideas?
Well, maybe we can turn Inox Stein into it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, conflation of the two.
I haven't got that far with it yet. If you had any suggestions, or if anybody does want to talk to me about this at another time, you're totally welcome.
Sarah.
I was just wondering what the kind of, I know that it's like to be a quiet zone, but would it be kind of silent study, or would it be more just somewhere that people can go just to, is the aim like silent study, or is it more just like a safe place for people to go to when they need to get away from, the noise?
I think the main intention of it would for it to be a quiet space, and I think that's what's mentioned, a quiet space, a safe space even, and just a quiet area for people to relax in, or if they were suffering from anxiety or other issues like that. But there wouldn't be, I'd be talking to students about what they want from it, but there probably wouldn't be hard and fast rules about what you couldn't do in it, apart from obviously quiet.
I was just wondering, in terms of spacing or the capacity, how will we look into that? Because coming towards the examination periods, more and more students will be looking for quiet spaces. And how will be the accessibility? Would it be first come, first serve, or the way we do for rooms that they book in groups or individually? How will we account for that for everyone?
Gabby, what have you got?
Just to mention about exam times, we are kind of like planning out what we're going to be doing with the building over exam time, and part of that will be to make a lot more of it quiet spaces. So these won't be permanent, they'll just be up and running round exam times like we do most years. So it won't be the quiet space that Annie's talking about, but in certain times we will increase that.
So I guess one thing I wanted to clarify is with the ideas platform, what we're hoping to get is either council making a decision out of it, or council being reasonably assured that it is being followed up. And so I'm loving that there's a conversation on it and people can continue if they want, but I think what we're asking to be recognised is that officers, in particular Annie and Sharman, are working on a quiet space, and that therefore it doesn't need a motion or anything else because it is in the process of being worked on, and that we can tell people who've put it in that that's what's being done.
I'd just like to remind council that I don't think it's necessary in this case. They are permitted to mandate officers on these issues if they think it's necessary.
Thank you.
Can I recommend that anybody who is interested talks further with me and other officers about this at another time throughout the year?
Thank you, Annie. The next one is, should the SU shop stop selling tobacco in our shop? Is that Gavin?
Okay, so as you can all see by the 28 likes and 37 dislikes, is a really contentious issue, but consensus on the ideas forum is that we should continue selling tobacco. I think it's a really interesting discussion, and I'd be quite up for having a debate around Healthy Campus Week with this as the title, but I'm happy to go with whatever council thinks. Any questions?
I think perhaps it would be useful, because this is a contentious issue, for you perhaps to bring a motion to council at some point about it, or to take it to a referenda, because I've never sent anything to referenda and I want to. Simon, sorry.
Can I suggest sending this to referendum to get the broad spectrum of students' opinion, as well as also
Cool.
including e-cigarettes in this
Interesting. So, Gabby, would you okay kind of...
Yeah.
Do we have to? Would it require us drawing up a referendum question to say the next council? Probably.
I'd suggest that elections committee look at the referendum in terms of the officer election to run it in time with that.
Yeah.
Also, I'm aware that elections committee are busy at the moment with by-elections and stuff, and I'm not inclined to kind of push any more work onto them all. Sam?
I still suggest that we keep doing a motion for the next council and just have a discussion.
Okay. Christy?
I think in terms of drawing up a question from this, it probably would have to be elections committee, and that council should definitely discuss the question, but do you think it's necessary for next week? Because I think it is fine as long as it's in line with rules for officer elections and stuff. So if people thought that was okay, I think that's when elections committee might be able to do it best.
So, is council happy to agree to send this to elections committee to consider in terms of a referendum? Are we okay with that?
Sorry, I don't think there's another council meeting after the next one before the officer elections begin.
Really? There's one in February. Yeah.
But the nominations open for, well, I suppose the nominations aren't relevant.
Well, the nominations aren't relevant,
Yeah, no, it's not
But
relevant,
it would give us a very short time frame if you work to try and get this agreed, if you weren't to include some debate next meeting.
This is not going to referendum.
Yeah.
That would be policy, wouldn't it?
If there isn't another meeting in time, I think elections committee are potentially overworked. And on elections, if it has to be for next council, I am willing to make council mandate myself to write what the question would be, because it shouldn't take long, but I think it just doesn't need to come under a whole elections committee conversation. Yeah. And then I will propose a referendum question, and hopefully it will be fine. Is that okay?
Is everyone happy with that? I think then we should vote on mandating Christie to draw up a referendum question on this idea. Sam?
Yeah, no, me and Gabby will work on it. It was just a question of elections committee not having to actually meet, so that we'll just do it in team. When I say myself, I guess it will be kind of us.
Yeah, mandate
the officers
team.
yeah.
Yeah. So the motion is that we mandate the officer team to draw up a referendum question based on this idea from the Idea Hub. Can I have votes for that motion, please? Votes against? Abstentions? Okay, fantastic. Moving on, last one. A safe crossing is needed outside 301.
Also me.
Gabby.
Hi everyone. So, to the best of my knowledge, this has been brought up before, both by the university and by other groups, to the council. I'm not quite sure why nothing came of that, so I'm happy to go away and find out the reasons for this. And I also think it's a really important point. I think we do need a safe crossing there. So once I found out the reasons as why the council didn't take this on, I'm happy to come up with a plan to start lobbying for that again.
Into that discussion, I mean, I'm not suggesting we formally mandate you to do this, but maybe look into whether the student union can sponsor it, because I know large housing developers often sponsor infrastructure to help with the flows of traffic going to and from their places. Maybe, if it's just a couple of £100 or something that it'll cost to install, maybe we could offer to sponsor it. No, I was just meaning in terms of some organisations do that, and I don't know what the cost is, I don't know what the legislation is, but that's a possibility. You could always ask the city council.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think the reasons for the council not putting it in are probably not to do with cost, but once I figured that out, I'd be happy to keep that in mind.
Yvette?
I had a meeting yesterday with the financial chief officer of the university, and just discussed this idea that had come here, and just asked about the possibility of it. And with the whole campus master plan taking place in a few years, he was a bit hesitant about that at first because it has been brought to his attention a few times. But he did recognise when I mentioned, for example, that the nursery in recent times have tried to get the kids across into the Students' Union building, and that it's been quite hazardous, realise that it is an issue that does need to be looked at further. So he has said that he will take that on, so I'm going to be pursuing that, and I'm working with Gabby. So, yep.
Great. So is council happy to just to note that Yvette and Gabby are working on that? Brilliant. Moving on. We've got Student Union Policy, 6.1, Policy Action Proposals. We are agreeing officer proposals for action in support of SU policies. These were circulated separately. Has anyone got any questions about any of them? No?
I have a question for
Go on,
Katie
Otis.
on Policy 11. It's Policy 11 and it's the third row of that council. You mentioned the Director of Sheffield International. I was just wondering what that organisation is.
So you mean who's the Director of Sheffield?
No. What is Sheffield International?
Oh, okay, cool. So, 1 second, I'm just going to get mine up. So, Director of Sheffield, so Sheffield International basically is, because obviously you know like we have Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor, and then we also have like different officers as well. And Director of Sheffield International oversees a lot of branches, like for example, the International Relations Office and International Support. So it's pretty much like the head of all international stuff that happen in Sheffield. So she's the person.
Okay, fantastic. Any other questions for any of the officers on policy action proposals? Can we just hold them this way? Because we're just agreeing them. Or should we vote on them? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter if we vote on them. I think so.
What, each one of those?
Yeah.
We'll tell council later in the year how we get on.
Fine. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any other questions on any other policies? Minna?
Yep. Also on 27.
Can we know that Gabby has now been successful in making postgraduate loans not capped at over 30-year-olds?
Congratulations.
Can there be sanctions?
To be fair, the university did do a lot of good work on this and organised this select committee. So I'm not going to call for a round of applause for the university, but it's really good to see that. No.
Thank you. So, any other questions on any other policies? Minesh again.
Should I also clarify that mine are coming next time because I didn't give proper ones?
Thank you. That's incredibly useful. Sorry, that sounded really sarcastic. That's just my default setting. It was sincere, I promise. It was useful. Thank you. Any other questions? Simon again.
It's maybe we'll be within the third waypoint. I just want to check all the concerns raised by some of my students regarding the law page 3 was whether it will be extended to other Latin magazines and the like, such as NHA, for example, that objectify.
That's a good question, actually. I guess we don't stock. Do we? We do stock them now. We do.
Check myself.
Okay, so
See what I'm hearing from
well,
students.
I guess they're currently not stocked. No, they're not stopped from being stocked under the current policy, and so I hope that conversation can come up within the review of this policy. So if we have concerns about lads mags, it also might be for different reasons that women choose to model in the midst. There's probably more about the written materials a lot of the time. So when I convene a meeting of the working group on it, I'll make sure that comes up for conversation. But yeah, a lot of that work, the work is going to be doing with making sure that the policy is in line with the more recent student sex work policy.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Are we all happy to? Actually, we're going to vote on this. So we're now voting on agreeing policy action proposals from the officers. Votes for agreeing those policy action proposals, please. I think it's interesting that you guys can vote on them, but yeah, because you make up part of quorum. Votes against, please. Any abstentions? Thank you. Moving on. The next two policies, as well as the other ones that were circulated separately, will be coming up for voting upon in the next council meeting and will be put online tomorrow morning for amendments to be submitted in writing. You will not be able to submit amendments at the council meeting next time. Any amendments you want to put must be done online in the next 10 days. Is everyone absolutely clear on that? Okay. We're going to quickly go through them and ask if anyone has any questions about each policy, because we think it's good for the debate to inform people about the policies before they go away and amend them. Otis.
On the 15th of May 2014, Council decided in a motion to scope out and work out if the union was able to go fossil-free. And I'm not suggesting that any staff here might know the outcome of those discussions, but could the outcome of those discussions also maybe be presented at next council?
I would suggest you liaise with Chris about that, because it's his policy.
It's more related to SU staff, I suppose, because I don't think Chris would know where to find the outcomes, and I don't think anybody outside the staff body would necessarily.
I would say, well, I don't know about this, but maybe talk to one of us afterwards. We can try and find out, and if we find out something, we can feed back to you next time.
That's handy, thank you. So the first policy that we're going to take questions on, just to make it clear, again, we're not voting on this. You just, if you've got any questions about the motion, you're not arguing for and against it, is Minesh's Fund Education Not War. You probably.
So basically, I can't remember when it was last in, but this is a revised policy. It's the last council motion. We said that I would go rewrite the policy because when it was submitted 3 years ago, it had some statistics in which are now out of date because it's been 3 years. So I rewrote it so that it would be well, it would probably last longer than 3 years, so that we don't have to rewrite it every 3 years, because that just doesn't make any sense. So, this is the rewritten policy, which reaffirms Sheffield Students' Union's commitment to fund education, not war, and support that the university does the same.
Does anyone have any questions on this? Otis?
Armed forces have never been included in the ban on advertising in careers fairs. Would you like to explain the reasoning behind the lack of inclusion?
It's a harder battle to win. If you want to make an amendment, please feel free. I mean, I'm personally in favour, but it's a harder battle to win.
Any other? Pete?
Yeah, I'm aware that a lot of the engineers in particular are quite interested in working with engineering companies that might have an arms division to them. Now, I can understand the reasoning behind ending all dealings with armed companies, including at careers fairs and in advertising. However, we might want to consider that we'd also be doing a disservice to the people who are within their rights and would like to go and work for a company such as that. How would we replace their options to go and work for such a company in absence of advertising and careers fairs?
So it's probably relevant for an amendment, but basically, so the call for fund education, not war is our student union's stance on what we think our values should be. So it's us calling on the university to lobby against arms companies and work with arms companies. So it will be issuing a long-term thing that we want more links with companies that aren't profiting in war and murder, rather than facilitating those that do. So it's asking the university to invite more companies that don't do that and trying to precipitate a change so that graduates might be more willing to work for ethical companies and not kill people for money.
Thank you. Any other questions? Did you have a question, sorry? All right. Okay. Any other questions on the fund education, not war policy? Great. We'll go away and look at it online, amend away if you so wish, or don't. And we'll discuss it next time and vote on it. Next one, quality doesn't grow on fees. Again, this is Ganesh.
So this is basically, well, the background is when I came into the job, well, just before I came into the job, we had a general election, and that changed everything related to higher education because the new government does not like higher education. So I figured this is basically just catching up with what I've done over the summer before we've had a council, because I've had to work against changes to higher education policy as education officer without a council to hold me accountable. So this is basically affirming our stance on HE Green Paper, which will soon be a HE White Paper. So the reason I didn't mention HE Green Paper is because I didn't want the policy to become out of date. So it's more our stance, reaffirming our stance that education is a public good, that we believe marketisation and increased competition within universities, which the Teaching Excellence Framework and which the HE Green Paper are emphasising, are not good for higher education. And it's just basically affirming what kind of we've already been doing, but our values and what kind of stance we take on higher education policy. It also ties into the NUS's Quality Doesn't Grow on Fees campaign, which, although I don't like the NUS, it had quite a good pun, so I thought it would be fun to use.
Any questions for Minesh on this policy? Simon?
Correct me if I'm wrong, it seems a fairly broad spectrum policy that looks at sort of a wide range of things. It doesn't necessarily impact anything local. There's no mention of sort of encouraging the sort of university as it is currently to work somewhat counter to that and ensure that it also doesn't engage in marketisation.
I'm sorry that me and Manesha once again swapping, but so I don't know if any of you want to know how closely we're working with the university on this. Me and the Vice-Chancellor released a joint statement this week on the Green Paper. It's pretty concise and it only lines out a couple of issues, but probably the main reason it's not in this policy is within the life of this policy in the next 3 years, I can't see the university changing anywhere near radically enough for them to suddenly change their mind. They are as against the proposals, I would say, as we are. And
I would also say, to some extent, it does in the resolves to make a proactive case for public universities. That is directly calling on the university to do that as well. But I think if we were calling on our university by itself to make a proactive case against marketisation within the context of marketisation of the entire sector, we would just be calling for the university to destroy itself. I think calling for opposition to the Green Paper as a whole, rather than calling for the university to stand in isolation, would be, because it is calling for the university to resist, but it's not the university to resist policies by itself, because I think it would just not succeed in a capitalist society if it did that. So, half and half. I think that's a different debate on marketisation.
I'm slightly concerned that this is now becoming the debate rather than a question, which I understand it's a debate worth having, and I definitely would encourage democracy in all forms. And so we can have the debate in 2 weeks' time. Or submit an amendment if you would like to change anything about the policy. Any other questions on the policy for Monash? Great, okay. So we're moving on to faculty representatives. Officers are going to kind of take leads on this, so if we can break down into our faculties. Pardon?
I forgot about this.
Oh, right, okay. So, yeah, so different, if kind of officers want to just shout out which ones they're doing, maybe we'll go around in order before everyone... Yvette, who have you got? Social science. Peggy?
Yvette's going to be doing the same thing, but I have to go right now.
All right, okay. Sorry, I've made that really obvious. Minesh?
Are we not doing fossil free in the...
Oh, sorry, yeah, I do beg your pardon. Thank you. So there are two other policies that got circulated separately. And does anyone have any questions on those two policies that they'd like to address to either Minesh or the two chaps at the back who have come along also to answer some questions we've now put on the spot?
Me, or do you want me to talk about it first?
If you could do something like really short and concise, that'd be great.
Okay, so asking the student union to support this policy. So we're running a divestment campaign, so we're essentially asking the university to remove its financial investments from the fossil fuel industry, from the top 200 fossil fuel companies. The effect of that is a stigmatisation of the fossil fuel company. It recognises the fact that we think it's wrong for the fossil fuel industry to profit from climate change, and that we want to disassociate ourselves from those that industry. And that's a powerful political statement that kind of challenges their political power to have influence in politics. As part of a global movement, nearly £3 trillion of dollars have been divested in the last year. It's a successful tactic. It's had successes with apartheid and tobacco. Yeah, that's just the gist of it.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions for... Sorry, what's your name? Michael on this. Christy?
This is an incredible feat of ignorance, but did we genuinely not have a fossil-free policy before?
I think there's a motion that's been passed, but not a policy.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it coming as a policy then.
Alex?
What investments do we have in sort of fossil fuels? Just clarify.
Yeah, it's hard anything at the moment. It's about £250,000 a year, which has gone down drastically in the last few years. So it would purely be a symbolic act. It would be of no difficulty to the university.
Any other questions? Brilliant. You're also doing the next one, aren't you? Oh, okay.
So this one's another campaign that we're running. It's to kind of lobby the university to join the Electronics Watch, which is a kind of transnational consortium that monitors workers' rights in the electronics industry. And since the university spends about £4.5 million a year on electronics through companies like Dell, which have particularly bad human rights records, we're trying to get the university to affiliate. It would only cost them around about £5,000 a year. So they've kind of got a social responsibility too, and it wouldn't be that expensive for them to do it. And they've already signed up to the Workers' Rights Consortium, which is a kind of similar organisation for the garments industry. And they're actually not as good at monitoring that specific sector either. So, and I think about 60 organisations across Europe have already affiliated, including about 10 other UK universities. So yeah, we don't really see why these unis shouldn't. So.
Yes, thank you. Christy?
You said it would cost the university £5,000.
It's worked out as like a proportion. I think Leeds and Durham pay around £5,000 a year.
So it wouldn't cost the student union £5,000?
No, it costs the university.
I just noticed in the results it also says to
Yeah, I think that got changed since I wrote it. I don't think that's supposed to be there.
I mean, I'm happy to fit it.
Yeah, but I think that wasn't the idea of this motion.
Any other questions?
There's a stupid one. Why is this on the sweatshop free if it's for electronics?
Because quite a lot of the electronics are produced in sweatshops.
And they just use the name of the...
That's the name of the national...
Misleading necessarily to anyone who hasn't read the policy. They'll see sweatshop and potentially pass it
It's
forward.
because it's part of a large campaign run by people and planning nationally. It's just why it's called that.
Any other questions? Okay, now we actually are going to move on to faculty representatives. So Yvette is doing social sciences, Flip? Science, Minesh?
Arts and humanities.
Okay. Arts and humanities, and then that leaves you with engineering.
No, I've medicine dentistry.
Yes.
And Gavin has
Yeah, I figured there was another one that was done to it. Okay, so if people want to kind of group around their officer, would you agree?
We'll find different corners of the room. I'll go by the coffee.
On the officers who's on University Senate already want to explain what University Senate is, because it's probably easier.
So University Senate is one of the university's two. Should I take them? I wish I had heard.
Yeah, Christy said it's the university's equivalent of this, and that might downplay it a little. But it's one of its two main decision-making bodies. The other is University Council. The University Senate is basically the highest decision-making body for learning and teaching. It sets learning and teaching policy for the whole university. It sets the direction of the university. It sets everything that happens. It is attended by the Vice-Chancellor, most of the Pro-Vice-Chancellors, basically mainly heads of departments, though a lot of departments sometimes have elections for who should sit on it. And then also, I think 10 student rep, maybe 15, and 5 representative councillors. And yeah, it's the highest decision-making body. It meets 4 times a year. It has probably 2 to 3 hour long meetings where it has long papers, and we discuss learning teaching strategy for the university broadly. Yeah. No one will talk but you, so you get to have the most say in what the university does.
Thank you for that.
Felt like it was just
Yeah, thank you. So the executive committee, that is to say the officers, decided that representative councillors won't have a vote in the election for faculty representatives. If council wishes to overturn that decision, it has to be with a 2/3 majority, just to make clear kind of the procedure of what's going forward. Okay, so Sam. So that is to say LGBT plus councillor, BME councillor, women's councillor, and so on and so forth. Is there any other questions? Izzy?
So are they appointing them from the groups that are going off in a minute?
Yeah.
So if we vote that the representative councillors can have a vote, does that mean they can also be appointed?
Yeah, so I think the issue is that so you're from history.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the arts and humanities faculty, history would then have 2 votes for the thing, especially if it gets done with AV and things like that. Then it just kind of works out that that the department ends up with 2 votes.
You know, I understand why they vote, but I mean, if
Candidacy stand.
I think again it has been convention.
Yeah, okay, I understand what convention is, but I'm also more concerned about what's...
I think if we let them vote, yes.
Yeah.
Suggest.
Minesh.
Can it also be clarified which representative councillors already sit on Senate? Because I don't think some of them already know.
Which...
Like postgrad talk, postgrad research, 3 others.
There's national law. Yeah, you would know. That would be in the constitution.
Not announced.
Shall I just speak on why councillors might like to vote?
Yeah, go. Yeah, okay.
Hello, council. I've been on council 3 years. Previously, we've had the ethos of all councillors are equal. We don't take the position you're elected to mean how many votes you have. We don't relate it to the size of your department. We don't make decisions based on. We don't make decisions about councillors based on their departments. We make them based on them being elected councillors. And for the past 3 years at least, and I say at least because as far as I know it wasn't new 3 years ago, and it may have been going for the Students' Union whole history as far as I know, there's been the ability to vote by every representative councillor because you are students within that faculty and you should have a say. And not all representative councillors are on Senate anyway. So otherwise, representative councillors don't get a voice in what is an incredibly important body within the university. So I ask that council stands by convention and allows representative councillors to vote in faculty rep elections.
Thank you. So, what is it? Okay.
So, as I understand it, will be electing a representative from each faculty in our small groups. So, do we not therefore provide 2 votes to a particular department within a faculty if we enable representative councillors to vote?
Which is, I think, the issue that SEC took from it. Yeah.
That would be true, but for example, Josh is not here today and there is no proxy, and I'm in his constituency because I'm a philosophy student and I'm also a representative councillor, but the philosophy councillor is not here.
I think
so.
Also the main point I was making is all councillors should be equal. That's the point of council. We all have an equal voice. Because I'm perfectly aware I come from a very small department, and if the voice of councillors was decided differently, maybe I wouldn't have such a loud voice. But the nature of council is such that we try and give everybody an equal say.
Sorry, this is. I just want to make sure that we're doing things fairly. Minesh.
On this current proposal, what would that mean for officers as councillors?
I think officers as non-students.
We are
previously been
students
allowed.
along student union regulations.
Okay.
So,
I'm
not saying I agree with the proposal, I'm
you've-
just saying we are councillors as
You've
well.
also previously been on council. What did we do that year related to officers?
Officers didn't, but if we're taking it that councillors should all get an equal say,
Yeah.
officers and councillors, I don't have an opinion, but really no.
I mean, if you're willing to propose that as an alternative.
Well, sorry, just to clarify, the motion before council is not on what Otis has said. The motion is, do we overturn the decision made by SEC? Otis is a argument that we should overturn that. Is anyone willing to make a speech arguing against overturning the SEC decision? Is anyone else willing to make an argument for keeping the SEC decision? Okay, sorry, Simon, because you need equal numbers of votes.
Sorry, I put my hand up a bit late there.
All right, okay.
I just want to say, in SEC, the reason we thought the decision was important was we do think all councillors are equal, but if we did let 2 councillors from history, for example, both vote in the same election, it would make all departments equal. So that was kind of the basis for our vote, and I guess it's up to you guys which you think is more important, but that was kind of our rationale.
Thank you. I'm going to move to a vote as well because the guillotine is rapidly advancing upon us as well. So, the motion is to suspend the decision of SEC and to allow representative councillors to have a vote in faculty representative elections. Can I have votes for that motion, please? Votes against? Abstentions? Motion fails. Needed a 2/3 majority to pass. Okay. I'm Adam, but it depends what the motion is, because unless it's a procedural motion, then you can't.
It would simply be that where a councillor is absent, if a proxy is available from the representatives, they may stand in place. Therefore, giving each department that their constitutional motion.
Yeah.
I don't know constitutionally.
No, yeah.
Constitutionally.
Yeah, I think it's... Yeah.
My feeling on that is that it shouldn't be necessarily a problem, in the sense that what we're doing was up to the whim of SEC anyway. It wasn't a constitutional decision to only have representatives from that faculty, only have department councillors there. So I don't really see a problem with a representative stepping in just because, I mean, last minute reasonings aren't necessarily that. Like someone not being able to be here last minute, maybe philosophy should have someone is the example themselves, I think, but I don't think it ties to the constitution necessarily, that's what I'm saying. Put that.
Okay. Otis, what's your issue?
It really upsets me to say this, but this is very unconstitutional. There's a clear procedure for proxies within the Constitution. This would not be following that, and I can't understand how this could be allowed to happen under the Constitution.
Willing to withdraw.
It really upsets me because it's a brilliant idea, but I really...
Oh, sorry, I thought you said it upset me that I didn't know the Constitution well.
Okay. So, are you happy to withdraw that then, in light of it being unconstitutional? Right, okay. Now we will actually break down into our faculties. Have fun. I'm moving as well.
We will need to extend the guillotine by 15 minutes, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. So everyone will vote in favour of extending the guillotine? 15. 15, I said 15, yeah. Sorry, excuse my accent.
It's at 8 o'clock.
Till 8 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah.
4? Was 4?
Okay.
Okay. Anyone against? I'm sorry, guys. Okay, we'll try to be quick. We'll be now moving on to officers' accountability. Oh, sorry. Before that, we will need to know the names of the people who've been elected faculty representatives. So if each officer would like to just give the name of the person that has been selected in their groups.
From engineering, it's Himanshi.
From medicine, dentistry and health, there's only one of the 3 councillors here and we didn't want to stand given that we're saying them, so I'm going to make sure we have a meeting and hopefully discuss other things about medicine, dentistry and health while we're there.
Okay.
From the Faculty of Science, it's Samuel Webster?
Weston.
No, Weston. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
From Arts and Humanities?
From Arts and Humanities it is Nathaniel Robinson. Is that right? Good.
And then that's it? No, yeah, social science.
Sciences is Ella from architecture. I don't know if his surname we didn't get, but there you go.
Yeah. Okay, Ella. Let me get mute. Okay. We'll now move on to officers' accountability. So we have Yvette and her officers' goals that we need to review.
Okay, so I don't know how you watched it last week, but I guess I'll just share with you guys my 3 goals, the goals I'm working on this year. My first goal is to make the Students' Union a beacon of sustainability. And by that, I mean just making sure we're recognised as a Students' Union that really takes sustainability seriously, that we really live and breathe our values, and that we're an organisation that others can look at as being really reputable in that area. Also, secondly, to empower students to make the changes they want to see. So helping students to understand the structures of the Students' Union, of the university, even of the NUS, so that they can actually make changes. And it's not just about officers. So as we saw, we had the ideas forum here, for example, and students submitting ideas. Again, helping students to understand how they can submit their ideas, how they can give us their feedback so they can make changes and make an impact in their environment. And lastly is to make the students' union everyone's students' union. And by that I mean making sure that those students who maybe don't use our building as much or our services as much are supported to find out how we can, or we support them and make sure we find out how we can best encourage them to use our services and give them the best that we have. And yeah, I guess opening our doors more to students who maybe don't use our building and to the local community as well, so external engagement work. And so, yeah, those are my 3 objectives, and under those are my 3 goals, sorry, and under those are the several objectives that I'll be working on during the year. So I hope you guys have had like a bit of a chance to read over them. But yeah, any questions you have specifically about those, please let me know. So, yeah.
Are there any questions? Otis?
What's the BIDI concept?
Oh, okay. So that was bring it, don't bin it. Oh, so I think it's bring it, don't bin it. So BIDBI it was meant to be. Bring it, don't bin it. And that was at the end of the year, the academic year, students before they left would bring in their items to Students' Union. So maybe like old duvets or cutlery, pots and pans, containers, and we would collect them and try and give it to a new home, basically, give it a new home, instead of having students go and take it to the dump or throw it away. And that name has recently been changed because of some issues, but we're hoping still to roll that out, and I'm hoping to expand on that idea and make sure that we still, save things that don't need to go in the bin, basically. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah. Sarah?
Just thought with that concept, do you think it's worth trying to get the university to advertise this to encourage students so that they know they won't necessarily have to bring it, but the opportunity for them to, get second-hand items there? Otherwise, I feel like it would kind of, people would come and they'd buy stuff and then they'd realise, and it would be almost too late.
Thank you for that feedback. I would definitely, make sure I take that on board. I think you're right. It is very important that we encourage students right at the beginning of the year to understand what they have available to them, and they can save money in that way as well. So yeah, I'll definitely take that on board. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, what's the Real Junk Food project?
Okay, so the Real Junk Food project is again about saving what could otherwise go in the bin, and it's a project launched. Well, actually, wasn't in Sheffield, but we do have a Sheffield kind of team here who work on saving food that otherwise would go in a bin. So they maybe go to different outlets or different restaurants, and they have student volunteers or their own volunteers who work together to bring food together and make meals out of that food that would have gone in the bin. And you pay as you feel. And it's a really amazing scheme that I'm hoping to kind of work on, just because, oh, they're not here now, but the Save Our Sandwich guys were here before, who were talking about divestment. Today alone, there was an event in the university, and it was a catered event, and there was a lot of excess food. And so just try to find volunteers to quickly grab that food and give it out to students or staff, make sure it doesn't go in the bin. And that's what they kind of do, but they try and make a meal out of it, because a lot of the food they salvage is fresh food, so like vegetables, and they can make soups and then go to the public and ask them to pay as they feel for those items. So yeah, it's a really great scheme, and I'm hoping that in the University and Students' Union we can kind of take that on board and make sure we don't throw things away that others can make into a meal and eat. So yeah.
Okay, Simon?
The work being done down that line to enable this food to be helpful in the community by passing sort of all this food
Yeah, definitely. So Save Our Sandwiches do just that. They go around the outlets in the Students' Union and the university, I believe, as well, to collect sandwiches, and they go and take it. But I don't think it's just sandwiches, actually. But they go and take it to local charities or organisations who then will distribute it to the local community, those who are homeless, those who are struggling for food. And we're just hoping to build on those volunteers and make sure all our outlets are, on board with this scheme and know that there is a process for dealing with food that can't be eaten at that time. So, yeah.
Okay.
How will you be promoting
Okay, so I wanted to create an SU ideas tree. So I'm speaking with SU staff at the moment. So you might have seen it near our offices, you might not, but there's just like a little white tree there, but the wall hasn't been branded or anything. But I'm hoping to link that SU ideas tree where students can hang up their ideas on leaves with the ideas forum page. And I've been speaking with the tech dev team to kind of revamp that page so it's a link. So again, it's kind of like you see the SU ideas tree on the page, and visually it links together. So in the Students' Union, you can hang up your ideas there, and hopefully there'll be a QR code on the wall where you can scan it and try and go to the website directly, and then vote on ideas. And go to the website, and hopefully it'll be branded a bit better so that students are engaged with it more, and just using the communication channels we do have to highlight that this is another way to empower students, that they can give their feedback. So yeah, I'm working on that. So with the tree, with the revamp of the page, with better communication, I'm hoping students will use it a lot more.
Okay, can we have one last question so then we don't have to extend the guillotine any further? Who wants? There's no.
Any questions?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So say something about introducing iPads, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to wonder, there's already a television screen that's being put up outside. Do we still need to increase the amount of technology for this? Because I think that's pretty visible to anyone who's passing out around.
Which plasma screen are you talking about?
There's a screen outside on the window of CSU that advertises normally where there was written the big decision a few weeks back.
Okay.
So do we still need another technological device or anything to be advertising what's going on in the SU?
I appreciate that, and that was something I had in my manifesto. And so again, when I got into the position, seeing what the scope was for that idea and bringing that to life, and realising that maybe speaking to students, it wasn't necessarily the best one. But yeah, I appreciate that the plasma screen does work really well. We are hoping to have a plasma screen outside the Student Union officer's office that kind of highlights what we're doing from day to day, so our timetable. So again, engaging with students about what officers do, what it is we're trying to do for students. So that's maybe the kind of route I've gone down instead of iPad stand. There might be an iPad near the SU Ideas tree, which will allow students to vote right there and then. Still talking about that, but I'm not sure that, I don't think I will be introducing iPads all over, but that was in my manifesto, I appreciate that. But there'll be other ways I'll try and engage with students and let them know what's going on.
Okay, we will now vote to approve Yvette's goals. All those in favour, raise your hands. All those against? All those abstaining? Perfect.
Thank you.
We'll be now moving on to officers' objectives. The objective updates were sent to us on our emails, and I'm positive you all have read them. And so we'll just see if anyone has any questions for the officers. Okay, Minesh and then Otis.
Can I just say that mine, it says they're going to be verbal ones. Can I say that I can suggest that I can just give written ones next time for time and also for proper accountability?
Okay.
It was just the lack of time.
Mm-hmm. Otis?
Just a very quick point on Christie's objective 2.d. Could you just tell council what the three organisations identified are?
In where?
Sorry, on objective 3, sorry, not 2.
So I've kind of forgotten what CEES stands for. I think it's Centre for Environmental and something else studies. So it's students who research in environmental and sustainability issues. Within the university, it's a specific centre for environmental kind of work. CNU is Carbon Neutral University. It's a lobby group of students, a lot of them science students who do that kind of research, but it's not a department itself, it's student-led. And the Grantham Centre, it's a sustainability research specific centre that the university runs. And so the idea behind all of them was to be sustainability, a lot of the science behind making sure that we use renewable energies. Obviously, we should be connecting with our students who know more about it to be going forward with it. So that's the basis of that. I should have clarified those weird titles.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Christy, Gabby, Simon? Okay, since none, what do I do? So, yeah, close the meeting. Okay, so what is that?
So yeah, we're happy to receive them.
Okay, so we're happy, council is happy to receive objective updates. So, yeah. Yeah, so that's it. Then what do you do? Just
Okay, so next one.
questions to officers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've not got any minutes to receive.
We don't have any minutes to receive from the Students' Executive Committee or the Trustee Board, so we will be waiting for those. And we can finish in the last 5 minutes with any questions to officers that you might have. So does anyone have any questions to officers? Yes?
Just on the point with the developmental officer. So the ideas forum, is your idea that they're going to post something on the ideas forum and then they're also going to write a leaf and then put it on the tree? Or is someone going to are you going to have a particular person that's writing out the ideas and putting them on the tree?
Oh, okay. So it's just different ways for students to engage with the ideas forum. So they can either be in the SU, write an idea and hang it on a tree. They could go online and do the same thing and write it up and it'll be on there. Anything that is hung on a tree will be uploaded onto the ideas forum website. So they all have the opportunity to be upvoted or downvoted. So they'll be collected, updated and written up for the picture taken of them and they'll be posted up there. So it just means that students have an opportunity to engage with the ideas forum, and it's kind of highlighted in Student Union Building that it does exist, and even if you see it there, you remember that you can go online and do the same thing at home if you want to.
I'm trying to clarify because I know that the idea behind the ideas forum
Yeah.
is that you haven't got time to pursue it any further, you just write an idea so that you can get a portfolio.
Yeah, yeah.
Any more questions to any of the officers? Okay, very good. So I guess the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, yes, the next meeting.
So the next meeting will be on Thursday, 10th of December at 5:15, Hicks Building, Lecture Theatre 2, which is the same one as this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, which is the